Prime Minister standing firm after a suggestion from the Trump administration that he is softening his tone since his speech in Davos.
Key stakeholders are making their pitches this week on the three-way trade deal between Canada, the United States, and Mexico.
Que van a colaborar en la revisión del TEMEC, ¿qué significa concretamente? Y se compromete México a no firmar un tratado sin Canadá.
Something unexpected rippled through global politics this week, and it did not come from Washington. It came quietly, from a speech most people ignored, and a response almost no one saw coming. At Davos, Canada floated a bold idea about how middle-power countries should protect themselves in a world dominated by unpredictable giants. Analysts brushed it off as harmless talk. Markets barely reacted. Then Mexico did something that changed the equation overnight. It said yes, publicly, clearly, and without hesitation. That single word sent tension humming across North America and forced policymakers to reevaluate assumptions they had taken for granted for decades. For years, the prevailing belief was simple. Mexico's economic and political future was tied tightly to the United States. Geography, trade volume, and history made that relationship unavoidable. Even when tensions rose, analysts assumed pragmatism would always pull Mexico back into alignment with Washington. Canada, meanwhile, was viewed as America's closest and most dependable partner, even when disagreements surfaced. The idea that Ottawa and Mexico City might begin coordinating independently, not against the U.S., but without centering it, seemed unrealistic, until this week. The moment began quietly in Mexico City on January 22nd. There was no dramatic announcement scheduled, no emergency meeting called. President Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo stood at the podium during her routine morning press conference, answering domestic questions. Then a journalist asked about Davos and a speech delivered 2 days earlier by Canada's former central banker and political heavyweight, Mark Carney. Sheinbaum could have dismissed it with diplomatic neutrality. Instead, she leaned in. She described Carney's speech as very good and said it aligned with the moment the world is currently living through. In diplomatic language, this was not a casual compliment. It was a signal. What Sheinbaum was endorsing was not just a speech, but an idea. 2 days earlier, on January 20th, the World Economic Forum had followed its usual script. Leaders spoke carefully, avoiding sharp edges, offering broad commitments without specifics. When Mark Carney took the stage, expectations were low. Observers anticipated another polished but forgettable address. Instead, Carney challenged a foundational assumption of modern geopolitics. He argued that the so-called rules-based international order had lost credibility. For middle power nations, he said, the strategy of competing for favor from dominant powers only increased vulnerability. Cooperation among peers, not submission to giants, offered a more stable path forward. Carney did not name enemies. He did not threaten retaliation. That was precisely why the message landed so sharply. It was a calm diagnosis of a system many countries felt trapped inside. Financial markets dismissed it as rhetorical positioning. Policy analysts in Washington categorized it as idealism dressed in Davos language. Mexico heard something else. Leaders in Mexico City heard recognition of a reality they had been navigating for years. The speed of Mexico's response mattered. Sheinbaum's endorsement came less than 48 hours later during a nationally broadcast press conference. This was not back-channel diplomacy or cautious signaling. It was public alignment. The timing showed readiness, not hesitation. Intent, not symbolism. To understand why this mattered so much, the backdrop is essential. Claudia Sheinbaum entered office carrying the weight of a deeply imbalanced relationship with the United States. She inherited years marked by tariff threats, policy reversals, and public pressure. Donald Trump's return to the presidency revived memories Mexico had never fully buried. His rhetoric toward Canada, including social media posts depicting American flags draped over Canadian territory and remarks referring to Canada as the 51st state, was not dismissed in Mexico as theater. It was read as a warning. If that language could be used toward Ottawa, it could easily turn south. Against that backdrop, Carney's message felt practical rather than ideological. It offered autonomy without isolation, cooperation without submission. Mexico had experienced firsthand how unstable trade relationships could derail long-term planning. NAFTA's dismantling and replacement with the USMCA introduced a renewal mechanism that guaranteed permanent uncertainty. Tariffs imposed with little warning confirmed where leverage truly sat. Competing individually for approval under those conditions offered diminishing returns. At the same time, groundwork had already been laid. Just days before Sheinbaum's comments, Canada's Governor-General Mary Simon had completed a 3-day visit to Mexico City. It was her first official visit and symbolically important as Canada's first Indigenous Governor-General. But the substance mattered more than the symbolism. Discussions focused on sovereignty, reconciliation, and shared experiences navigating powerful neighbors. Mexican lawmaker Dolores Padierna Luna later described the visit as extraordinary, emphasizing the need for deeper dialogue and mutual support between the two countries. Mexico's lawmakers echoed similar sentiments across party lines. Juan Ignacio Zavala Gutierrez of the Citizens Movement Party described Carney's speech as powerful and clear, noting that emerging global forces were pushing middle powers to form alliances to manage pressure from hegemonic states like the United States and China. From the Institutional Revolutionary Party, Ana Isabel González González warned that the future of the USMCA itself looked uncertain and that unity was no longer optional. These concerns were rooted in experience. Both Canada and Mexico remembered the first Trump administration vividly. Tariffs appeared overnight. Negotiations unfolded under constant threat. Alliances were treated as transactions. The built-in renewal mechanism of the USMCA ensured that instability was not a temporary phase, but a permanent feature. Carney's speech articulated what both countries had felt, but rarely said openly. Competing separately was a losing strategy. Economic logic reinforced the political argument. Mexican journalist Alex Gonzalez Ormerod pointed to how complementary the two economies truly are. His example focused on canola, a narrow commodity that revealed a broader truth. Mexico imports canola from the United States. Canada exports canola to China. Both relationships leave each country exposed to external leverage. Redirecting trade between Canada and Mexico would reduce dependence while strengthening regional resilience. This approach was not ideological, it was practical. Canada's recent dealings with China offered a model Mexico studied carefully. Electric vehicles entered Chinese markets. In return, canola tariffs were lowered. Economic interests were protected without surrendering sovereignty. Mexico saw a country acting strategically rather than reactively. By the end of the week, it was clear this was not a coincidence or a one-off reaction. It was the visible surface of a deeper shift already underway. The language coming from Mexican lawmakers grew increasingly direct as the implications settled in. Dolores Padierna Luna criticized Trump's territorial imagery as offensive and argued that sovereignty demanded a response similar to what Carney had outlined. Her emphasis was not on breaking away from North America, but on rebalancing it. That distinction matters. The goal is not fragmentation, it is leverage. Juan Ignacio Zavala Gutierrez articulated the calculation clearly. Negotiating alone with the United States places each country at a disadvantage. Presenting shared interests together changes the equation. Unity transforms vulnerability into bargaining power. This thinking extended beyond speeches into concrete planning. Carney's visit to Mexico City in September 2025 laid early groundwork. Governor General Simon's January visit reinforced it. A major Team Canada trade mission scheduled for February 2026 signaled escalation from symbolism to substance. The alignment goes deeper than trade. Scheinbaum highlighted shared discussions around Indigenous reconciliation, pointing to common historical challenges shaped by colonial legacies. Addressing these issues together builds trust that extends beyond contracts and tariffs. It forms the foundation of a partnership grounded in values as well as interests. This is how power shifts usually happen, not through dramatic confrontations, but through coordinated decisions that slowly alter incentives. The decline of unquestioned American dominance in the hemisphere is unfolding through bilateral ties among middle powers who recognize mutual benefit. The idea of a world less dependent on Washington did not come from Europe or Asia. It was articulated by Canada and validated by Mexico within days. Importantly, this direction appears to transcend individual leaders. Mexican lawmakers noted that former President Andrés Manuel López Obrador had also emphasized strengthening ties with Canada. This suggests a strategic trajectory rather than a temporary political reaction. With the USMCA renegotiation looming in 2026, Ottawa and Mexico City are no longer preparing separately. A shared framework is emerging. Together, Canada's roughly $2.3 trillion economy and Mexico's $1.85 trillion economy form a bloc exceeding $4.1 trillion in GDP. That scale commands attention in any negotiation, especially with an administration inclined to view trade as a zero-sum game. Early indicators will matter. Shifts in agricultural supply chains, joint energy initiatives, or technology partnerships would confirm that this third path is operational. Ironically, Trump's continued public pressure on both countries risks accelerating the very diversification he opposes. Every insult and tariff threat reinforces the logic of coordination. Dependence weakens leverage. Partnership restores it. Scheinbaum did not have to elevate Carney's speech. A polite acknowledgement would have sufficed. Instead, she named it, praised it, and broadcast that endorsement nationwide. The signal to Ottawa was unmistakable. Mexico is ready. Historians may one day point to this narrow window in January 2026 as a turning point. not because of a treaty signing or a dramatic summit, but because two middle powers quietly chose cooperation over competition for approval. The assumption that Washington would remain the sole axis of North American politics is being revised in real time. What once seemed permanent now looks flexible. Power is being renegotiated, not through confrontation, but through coordination. And that may be the most important shift of all.